My dear friends, in my first video I sought to express my deep-seated anger at the stance of the South African government in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I argued that to remain neutral in the face of a brutal invasion not only serves to appease the aggressor, but undermines the quintessential values that are meant to shape the actions of our nation. We have subsequently received further elaboration and explanation on the part of the South African government for the stance of neutrality. And the purpose of this video will be to lay out some of the arguments and to provide some counterpoints for you to consider. The reason for the stance of neutrality can be distilled down to three main arguments, which provide the premise for this decision. Firstly, that the trigger of this conflict was the expansion of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization eastward, despite repeated assurances and promises to Russia not to do so. And the subsequent failure to provide adequate security assurances to Russia is what provoked this conflict. Secondly, that although in the short term we may be able, through economic pressure or force of arms, to provide the cessation of hostilities, due to the underlying issues already discussed, this would not be conducive to a long-term lasting peaceful solution. And thirdly, that the real path to peace in this conflict lay through negotiation and mediation, and any statements made to the contrary of this aim only serve to contradict it. Now, although some of these arguments do appear to echo Kremlin talking points, they nonetheless do not appear to be intentionally pernicious, merely naive or of shallow insight. Certainly, the eastward expansion of NATO was provocative to Russia, and although the Bucharest Declaration of 2008 did reject Ukraine's membership to NATO, they nonetheless left the door open for European democracies who are open and willing and able to assume the responsibilities and obligations of membership to join. Now, if we are to base our stance on security assurances provided, surely those that have been codified into treaties should take precedence. For example, the Bucharest Declaration, by which Ukraine relinquished its nuclear arsenal, was provided on the premise of the prohibition of Russia's use of military arms against Ukraine and the guarantee of its territorial integrity. Secondly, the cessation of hostilities and the end to this humanitarian disaster should be our goal, and our president has already conceded that the use of economic pressure may be able to provide this end. And lastly, the negotiation under invasion has only provided the maximalist demands that we see from Russia today, to the extent that they require Ukraine to include in their constitution, codified, that they will not join NATO, the recognition of the annexation of the Crimea and the separatist regions of the East, the replacement of the Ukrainian regime, what President Putin calls denazification, and finally, the complete demilitarization of Ukraine, meaning Ukraine would have no standing army. These were the kind of demands laid at the Axis powers at the end of World War II, when their country had been destroyed and left in ruins. And perhaps that is the intention. I've said many times, Ukraine cannot reason with the Russian bear when his head is sitting in between its mouth. And it's for this reason I once again turn to our leaders. Please see some sense. Condemn Russia's invasion, which has already resulted in millions of refugees. Join the 141 countries around the world that have condemned and demanded that they withdraw their troops so that real negotiations can occur. This is the only way. Any other action would serve not only to embolden the aggressor, but would render us to the wrong side of history.